Hello viewers, welcome to the lab. Today we are talking about TV test cards. A few weeks ago I had this crazy idea that I wanted to recreate the classic Testcard F on my Quantel paint box. I thought this would be pretty easy, but once I got started I then realised I was so very wrong. So I thought I'd make a video on everything that I learned about test cards while I created it, with a little bit of history thrown in as well. First off, I would like to thank my loyal patrons for supporting this channel. I can't thank you enough. If you want to be a patron and help me make videos here, then follow the links in the video description to my Patreon page. I'd also like to thank my sponsor PCBWay for their continued support. If you're an electronic hobbyist and design and have your own PCBs made, I can certainly recommend giving PCBWay a try, as they offer a huge array of services relating to PCB manufacturing, so links to them will also be in the video description. Go check them out. So, TV test cards. This is my recreation of Testcard J. It has taken 3 significant attempts to get this right and many hours of work to create this on my Quantel paint box. It's not perfect by any means, but I am quite pleased with the outcome now. It's getting pretty close to what Testcard J should look like. Now, there's been quite a few test cards used in different regions and countries, but the one everyone knows and loves here in the UK is Testcard F. Those of you who saw TV before the 90s will certainly remember several types of test cards shown here in the UK. Beyond the 90s, and with the switch off of analog TV, they're a bit of a rare thing to see now. But back in the 80s and earlier, you could hardly turn on the TV without seeing one. They were often shown when channels went off air, but the transmitter remained on, or sometimes during technical issues. For the general public, they were simply a weird picture that was on the telly while you waited for your programme or channel to come on air. But in reality, they contain lots of things to help engineers spot and solve problems in the broadcast network, as just about all of the parts in the test card are dedicated to something technical. So I thought it'd be fun to go through them and show you all the ones that I know about. So what I'm going to do now is switch to video capture from my Quantel paint box, as it will make things easier for me and you'll be able to see the test card better as well. Hello viewers, incidentally I'm using a new setup to capture the paint box video. I'm now using one of my video scalers to upscale and deinterlace to 720p 50 and then capture HDSDI with OBS Studio. So I'd be interested to know if you think it looks okay or not. Right, let's start by looking at the utterly classic Testcard F. Now this is a rather terrible quality version I found on the interwebs, so sorry about that. Now the original Testcard F was created in the analog era when colour TV first arrived in the UK in the late 1960s. This featured Carol Hersey and Bubbles the Clown. Now this card and some minor variations of it were used until around 1999, but this test card certainly holds a special place in the memories of people in the UK. It's totally classic and many people recognise it. Testcard F was designed in the analog age, and as digital broadcasting and production increased in the late 90s, a new test card was devised and it was known as Testcard J. There we go. It contains all of the features of Testcard F with some changes and additions. Now it's Testcard J that I recreated on the paint box, so I will talk about only Testcard J from now on, just so there is no confusion. So the basic setup of a TV test card usually shows some kind of grid to aid alignment and setup and focusing of CRTs. Don't forget, we all used to watch telly on great big glass tubes. You would also find some grayscales and luminance gratings, things like that, to allow an engineer to see how much detail was making through to the screen, contrast and brightness adjustments, things like that. There'd also be elements that would point to the visible portion of the picture, and parts that would not be visible to the normal viewer. So what I'm going to do is go through each of these elements of Testcard J, and I will try and explain them as best I can. So let's start at the top. On line 1 we have a single white line with some notches in it. I'll just zoom in here. You can see the white line, and then there's a notch here, and then there is another 3. You've got 2 there, and then 1 just there. Now these are used to indicate if the top line has been removed or partially removed by any preceding processing. I believe there was some certain equipment which might remove part or all of line 1. Next down the screen we have colour bars. So we have white, yellow, cyan, green, magenta, red, blue and black. Now with no colour information encoded into the picture, these become stepped grayscales, starting at white and going through to black. In the magenta rectangle we also have an arrow pointing to the exact centre top of the picture. Right, if we continue in the overscan area, we have these weird pans down the left and right hand side. I believe that these are odd patterns that could cause the loss of picture, the loss of sync on an analog picture if your receiver is poorly adjusted. I'm not quite sure how these work, and there is certainly differences between Testcard F and Testcard J. Now J is designed for digital, and there are some differences, so there could well be some things in here that are specific to digital TV. I don't know. If anybody does know about how these colours and shapes work, I'd be really interested to know. So if you do know, leave them in the comments. In between these weird patterns we have some arrows, and these define the left and right centre of the picture. Now you might also notice here that we have an arrow, and then we have a small reflection of that arrow stuck on the side of it. So if we zoom into that, I can show you in a bit more detail. Now what this is actually showing here, this central point between the 2 arrows, is actually the 9th and, if I scroll over to the other side, the 702nd luminance sample. The reason for this is digital TV actually has a slightly larger picture than analog. This was done deliberately when digital TV was first devised. They wanted to ensure that an analog picture would absolutely guarantee that it would fit inside the digital picture without losing any information. So what they did is the digital picture is slightly wider. It's actually, so these reflections essentially define the digital portion of the picture, and the large arrows define the analog portion. So what we're looking at here is a digital picture. This is coming SDI out of my Quantel paint box and then upscaled, as I mentioned previously. So what I can do is actually switch this to an analog PAL picture, and what you're going to see is those little reflections disappear because they lie outside of the analog timing. So those bits will just disappear. So I'm just going to lean down and switch over to a composite PAL picture, and you can see now that those little reflections have disappeared because they're not part of an analog picture. Right, at the bottom here we have some black and green castellations. These are designed to demonstrate a luminance to chrominance delay issue. I'll explain those in a little bit more detail when I talk about this green square here. There's also a couple of white squares. I don't really know what those are used for. They're on Testcard F as well. They could just be registration marks or just a square that defines the corner of the picture. I'm not entirely sure. So if you do know, please let me know. And just like the top, we've got an arrow pointing to the bottom center of the picture. And then finally, along the bottom, we've got the same single line that we had at the top of the picture, which allows you to see if the last line has been all or partly removed from the picture. Right, let's take a look at the main part of the test card, which is the part visible to the normal viewer. We've got plenty of grid lines to help align parts of the picture, aligning the position and focusing and things like that. Of course, you've got to remember this came from the analog era when we were watching TV on big glass tubes, and the picture could be moved around on that tube. Right at the top middle of the picture, we've got this device here. I'll just zoom into that. Now on Testcard F, it did not have this green square. This was added in Testcard J. But what the black and white boxes actually do is demonstrate any ringing or ghosting issues in the signal. Unfortunately, I can't really demonstrate that because even on my analog signal, the signal's so good, there's not really anything showing there. But if you were getting ringing and ghosting, you'd easily be able to see these as little ghosts and stuff after these lines. Now the green square, this is used to demonstrate delays between the luminance and chrominance. As I said, this was introduced on Testcard J. Now what I can actually do is demonstrate this using my video scaler, because what I can do is actually alter that delay factor in the scaler, and it would mirror any issues that you would see on an analog set. So if I switch over to the analog signal, and if I reach down and adjust the luma chroma delay value, we can see here that if I go to one extent, we get a grey line down this side, and if I change it the other way, we get a little grey line down that side. So this basically smears the colour information, and the green square here allows you to see and align the timing so it's spot on. Now the reason why you might have this issue with the colour being offset from the luminance is down to the fact that the colour information is actually processed separately in the receiver, and it's actually quite complex to decode all the PAL colour information, and it takes longer for the electronics to do that than it does to process the luminance. Now back in the day, old analog sets might have used a glass delay line to actually hold back and delay the luminance, so when it comes out, it's actually in time with the colour. Right, so I'll just switch back to digital and we'll zoom out. To the left of the central picture, we have a grayscale chart. Now, because this is Testcard J, white is full white and black is full black. And we also have a couple of little dots here on the white and black rectangles. Now, these were introduced. These were actually visible on Testcard F, but they changed on Testcard J. They actually flash on and off once per second, and these were here to indicate that a digital picture was present, because they would flash on and off. If the digital signal stopped, then they would stop flashing, of course. Now on an analog signal, if you lost the signal, the picture would disappear. So they introduced that on Testcard J just for digital TV. Now to the right, we have some luminance gratings. These are a luminance sine wave at 1.5 megahertz, 2.5, 3.5, 4, 4.5 and 5.25 megahertz. And what these allow you to see is how much bandwidth is actually getting through onto your tube. If the bandwidth is getting attenuated at all, then these slowly turn grey, and it'll be a good gauge to see how much bandwidth is actually getting through into your picture. Now this is a good time to look at the four corner arrows. These indicate the four corners of the visible picture, and these are also a luminance sine wave. Now these look a slightly different frequency to the 1.5 megahertz, but actually they're not. These are 1.5 megahertz as well. The reason why they look different is because they're being tilted at an angle, and these make 1.5 megahertz as the scan line intersects them. So let's turn now to Carol Hersey and Bubbles the Clown. This picture was commissioned specifically for Testcard F and contains everything you need to demonstrate a good picture. There are shadows, highlights, skin tones, and a couple of technical things put in specifically for use in the test card. For example, the buttons on Bubbles the Clown are yellow against green, used to indicate luma and chroma delay issues like we saw with the green square. In the original Testcard F, the X on the noughts and crosses board was supposed to indicate the exact centre of the picture, but for some reason it never made it into the final test card. Now, because this is Testcard J, it was created in 1999, they re-scanned the original slide. They corrected a lot of the colour issues, made a slightly wider view, and they also aligned the X to where it should be, which is bang in the centre of the picture. And that pretty much concludes Testcard J. Now, I should point out that this version of Testcard J I've created on my paint box is a facsimile. It's a recreation. It's not accurate. I've done it as best I can based on my experience of my Quantel paint box and my knowledge of the test card and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it is getting pretty close. Now, the original test card, I doubt would have been created on a Quantel paint box or probably even any kind of drawing package or art package. From what I understand, this is actually generated using software. It's actually a software generated thing that generates all these patterns in the right places, which then outputs a digital BT601 signal, which is essentially SDI. It actually generates the bit stream, which would be a single frame of video. So it's not really created in any kind of art package, as far as I'm aware. If anybody knows how this was actually created originally, then I'd be interested to know. So I hope you've all found that interesting and learned a few things. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.